WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're calm, we're local. We are awaiting baseball, we are awaiting football, and I'm no longer awaiting the photos from this guy eating pizza with sandals on the boardwalk in Wildwood. Luke Jones, I've never been to Wildwood in my life. My mother, my maternal mother, not the mother that you know, but the mother who birthed me, loved Wildwood, and she would always tell me about the frozen custard and the roller coasters, and of course, having you in my life the last decade and a half, and Ray Bachman for almost 3 decades now, the Wildwood guys, like, I'm embarrassed that I've never been to Wildwood, right? I mean, and you're down there watching all this football nonsense. I mean, you went away and you come back and the Redskins aren't the Redskins anymore. Who knew, right?
Yeah, lots of stuff happening without anything really happening, right?
Nothing has happened at all. Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's lots of talk and lots of things behind the scenes happening, but still kind of waiting. Yeah, there has been some MLS has started up.
And stopped and slowed down. And
I have caught a couple matches. You know me, I'm not a big soccer guy, but I even found myself checking that out.
I follow Grant Wall just because he's got a cool wife, so that's what I do.
But it's, we're moving closer, and, we're about 2 weeks out from what we think is the scheduled start of training camp. As I've said to you, and I've made very clear all along, as baseball was being crushed, and much of it completely justified, what I continued to point out was, let's not compare baseball to the NHL or the NBA when their seasons were almost completely finished from a regular season standpoint. What will be interesting is how it compares to the NFL. And as we've seen over the last week, talk of the NFL wanting salaries, 35% of salaries to go in escrow, and players balking at that, understandably, and not knowing what's going to happen as far as protocols and testing and things of that nature. We've said over and over the last 3 or 4 months that the NFL had time on its side. Well, we're getting very close to the point where that's...
Tick-tock.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So, and that's not to say it's not going to happen or it won't happen, but there are still some pretty substantial hurdles to clear here, and we're 2 weeks out from when it's supposed to start. I think we all assumed the preseason was going to look different, whether they were going to have any preseason games at all, whether it was going to be reduced. I think we all were preparing for that, but we're a couple months out now from the start of the regular season, so still lots of boxes to check and lots of issues to address.
All right, so first things first, as you get off the beach and you come back for an all-star game that doesn't exist, and baseball summer training and the bright lights, and I can't wait to see your first hot dog down there in the press. They're going to have you, and bring your own hot dog with you. Bring your hot dog with you. Stop at G&A and see Andy on the way in, the way my pop and I did on 33rd Street. For you, what are you expecting to happen first? I mean, I haven't talked to John Harbaugh in a little while. I plan on sort of connecting back in with him. I know Eric DeCosta and I vacationed at the same time at the same place a couple of weeks ago, and I see the players doing what they're doing out on Twitter and not doing on Twitter, and who's throwing the ball to whom and all of that. But I shudder to think at how this is going to go down when they bring together Republicans and Democrats, black players and white players, old coaches and young players, all together, 6 feet apart, with masks on. It's going to be like in the first time I went in the supermarket where I told the guy to stay 6 feet away from me, and he got up on me to be a dick and breathed even more on me, because that's the way this politically has gone. But I can't imagine breathing on top of each other. These baseball players have been dirty, right? Like we talk about the school systems. We haven't been able to keep NBA, soccer, and all of these have had issues. Aroldis Chapman the other day. What about the NFL, other than the fact that we're bigger, we're better, we're manlier, we have more money, we're the NFL, F you, makes anybody think that this isn't going to be a factory of COVID, and most of these players are coming from Florida, Arizona, Southern California, wherever the warm places are, Texas, for God, Lord knows we breed them down there. Ask Earl Thomas. We're going to bring all these human beings together, put them on airplanes, who haven't been listening probably for the most part because they're young and infallible to begin with, into an environment. They're going to bring their kids and their wives. I mean, This just sounds like the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I'm not an epidemiologist, Luke, but I'm on record as saying this is dumb.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think, I've tried to be more, certainly I emphasize the cautious part of it, but to try to be cautiously optimistic. But where you have a sport like baseball that if we acknowledge, the concerns with travel or being in a clubhouse, things of that nature, the sport itself does lend itself, you can talk about the catcher, the batter's box and the catcher and the umpire, but the rest of the players on the diamond, the rest of the players on the field, it does lend itself to distancing. Fully acknowledging the other issues at work when you're not on the field. But in the NFL, you have 22 players, and of those 22, you have 5 offensive linemen. You can throw the tight end and the running back in there. You can throw the quarterback in the pocket in there. You have the defensive line. You have the front 7. I mean, other than players on the outside who, they're interacting and coming into close contact, you have a lot of close contact. Now, what we do know, the little bit that we do know about this virus is its prolonged close contact that tends to produce the most infections, tends to be the most contagious kind of scenarios. But you have offensive linemen and defensive linemen engaging, not even, forget 6 feet, not even 6 inches when they're contacting each other. And how many times is that happening per game? I mean, you have, 140 snaps from scrimmage, 145 snaps from scrimmage, 150, 160, whatever the number is in a given game. That's a lot of interaction. And I do think there are certain things you can do, and I know Dr. David Chow, who has been a friend of WNST over the years, has talked about this. I know other medical experts have talked about, extending we've seen players wear the eye shields on their face mask, actually taking that concept and extending it all the way over the face mask. So does that help the spread of saliva and that kind of concern? I think it can. But you're still talking about risk. And I had to chuckle, Nestor, last week when the NFL put out there, or at least NFL media put out there, that players were not allowed to exchange jerseys after games, as we've seen become the practice, which I just chuckle and say, look, that's either some security theater there to say we're doing something for the sake of doing it, to say that, hey, we're being conscious here, we're being careful here, we're being cautious, or if that's truly that big of a concern, then we shouldn't even be having the conversation about playing football to begin with. So, either way you look at that, you just laugh and say, really? But there's problems. And then you get into the fact that you have a bigger roster. I mean, baseball, we're talking about 30-man roster.
Well, football also has Colin Kaepernick in the knee and the national anthem, and they have all of that going on as well, right?
Well, sure, but I'm talking...
Once they get to the field, that's going to be... You think Trump's not going to make that issue one if they ever kick the football off 6 weeks from now? That the biggest story that day won't be kicking the football. It's going to be the national anthem by the time we get there. There's a circus within the circus, right? And I'm trying to figure out the juice and the squeeze for all the sports. Dude, I'm in a sports business. It's a sports here, right? Like, I want them to play. I just don't think they can. And as I sit here, I will be the science naysayer on the side of the virus will make the rules. And I'm watching them. I mean, it's like the fish at the end of the Faith No More video, for crying out loud. Like, they're flipping around when it's pretty obvious that this isn't going to be difficult to do. This is going to be nearly impossible to do.
And that very well may be the case. And
I applaud them for trying and putting on the brave face and all of that. But
Right. I mean, at some point in time, heaven forbid, no one wants to see the worst case scenario that plays out of a player dying, anything of that nature. I mean, let's state the obvious first. Or
the player's mother dying because or whatever, right?
Sure, but going, I don't want to say beyond that because that's the worst case scenario. But if we're going short of that, I don't have a problem with them exploring the attempt of it, but it is very much a case, just like we've seen with baseball. I said to you in our previous conversation, my concern wasn't nearly as much the X number of players that have tested positive, which has been, a real number, but it hasn't been half the league or anything like that. The bigger concern has been the delays with the testing. The fact that, we've seen reports now that teams have gone beyond MLB's protocol testing to get third-party testing, and then you kind of look at that through the lens of the pandemic for the entire country and testing where it's really good in some areas, in other areas of the country it's problematic. Timetable and the return of the results, problematic. So you look at it from that standpoint, I much like you, I certainly applaud trying. I certainly am okay with them trying it, but where is the line where you say this probably just isn't in the card?
This isn't a good idea for 2,000 men to be moving them around and having them breathe on each other. And as I've said, and I guess it took me to last week, and I said this when we talked about baseball, there's no other place in our society where we are encouraging men to get together 22 at a time without masks, getting on airplanes and wrestling around in the mud and breathing on each other for our entertainment purposes and as an inducement to wager, quite frankly, and for civic pride, for old Baltimore. And there's no logic to it from an epidemiology standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, from a health standpoint, from a safety standpoint. As Andrew Brandt pointed out a couple of weeks ago, if this were about player safety, we wouldn't be doing this.
Sure. Well, but I'd also say if it were purely about player safety, I don't know if we'd play football, period. But
Fair enough.
Your points are well taken, and look, I'm not going to sit here and say you're wrong because I don't know if it can be pulled off. I've tried to be cautiously optimistic. I think there are measures that can be put in place to make it safer, as I mentioned, where you extend the concept of a face shield. There are lots of rules in place as far as players, full team meetings and things of that nature. What's the testing going to look like? I know there's been talk as far as players want testing every day. The league.
Because they go home and sleep with their wives and their children. That these idiots in Washington, D.C. are trying to send kids to school with this moron DeVos running around on the Sunday news. So now the kids are going to school with other kids. They're coming home. They're hugging Daddy, Calais Campbell, who's then going in and sweating next to Matt Skura, who's then going home with his wife. It's a pathogen. You know what I mean? Like it's to pretend it isn't here is to wake up to what Florida and Arizona and California and Texas are waking up to this morning, which is go ahead and run around without a mask for 6 weeks. We'll see how it goes. It's not going to go well.
Well, but we also have to remember that there are degrees of risk that we're all figuring out with every aspect of our lives. The safest thing to do would be to not do anything at all, and we all shelter in place until there's a vaccine. That's not practical, at least in certain aspects. Now, that's not...
Neither are playing 60-game baseball seasons either, by the way.
and to be clear, that's not me arguing that the NFL or Major League Baseball or professional sports is an essential service either. Let's be clear. But, it's managing risk. It's looking at this, from a testing standpoint and protocol standpoint. And, I think, at this point in time, it's one thing to talk about, a team in, look at New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania and states that, had major problems early on in this pandemic, look better at the moment. But what does that look like a month from now? What does that look like 2 months from now? You look at the southern states now, 2 or 3 months ago didn't look as concerning. Now it looks horrible. What happens a month from now? What happens when we get into the fall? There's just so much, there are so many balls to juggle here, so many hoops to jump through to try to thread this needle, so to speak. And when you break it all down, even if I don't think when I look at it and say, okay, it's one thing to talk about early to mid 20-somethings who are healthy, incredibly in shape. are those the kind of player, the kind of individuals most at risk from the virus? No. I think the numbers would dictate that. However, like you said, it's that chain of interaction, family, extended family, friends, neighbors, and that's those are the same questions we've all been navigating, except now you're putting it in the context of
I haven't touched my son in 6 months, man. You know what I'm saying? Like my wife hasn't touched her mother, father in 6 months. Right? Like
sure.
so. Like to think that they're just going to go out and play football for money and get away with it. I don't think they are. You know what I mean? Like I just don't think they are. I don't think most people that have tried to get away with it have sort of gotten away with it. Maybe in the short term, but not in the long term. When it comes to physical contact in the era of a pathogen, we all thought it was gone, and now every bar in Canton last week is getting in there fumigated because whoever went somewhere to Dewey Beach or to Wildwood or to Nags Head or to Ocean City or they're here or they went to this house party or they just took their mask off just one time. I mean, I lost another friend last week to COVID, 47 years old. She died. I grew up with her. So that's where we are.
Yeah. And look, I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist.
But I respect them.
I do. And there are lots of people talking about this and trying to navigate this and trying to figure this thing out. And, where professional sports fits into that, we're going to find out.
Where you turn out to be a real idiot is where you try to outthink the science part of it, right? When you're trying to out-science science because you're smarter than the science, than what the pandemic playbook has said for 25 years, that if this ever happened, it would be like a movie, and that's pretty much what it's been like. I mean, the movie never accounted for, does the NFL play in the middle of the pandemic, or does baseball try to figure it out? Well, yeah, it's America. It's about money. They'll try to figure it out. And I know over in Europe, it's been intoxicating, right? You're watching these soccer leagues all sort of pull it off, right? You're watching Taiwan play baseball. Adam Jones is hitting doubles off the wall over in Osaka, right? So we are seeing these other cultures come back to life.
Yeah, and like I said, where American professional sports fits into that, I don't know. I mean, I'm not smart enough to make that call. I'm not. I'm not going to sit here and try to say it can be done, and I'm also not going to sit here and say there's no freaking way they're going to be able to play, because it is being done in other parts of the world. And I don't know what the next month is going to look like. I don't know what 2 months is going to look like. I have no idea what the fall is going to look like. I mean, we've all, second wave, no second wave. More lethal, less lethal. Hey,
I'll buy that baseball might get away with it, right? I mean, 60 days. They might. Football, however, as we get to think that football is going to start this in September, we're going to play a Super Bowl in Tampa in February. I laugh at that. I mean, I laugh at the arrogance of that. That sounds like something Donald Trump would say. That's how stupid it is.
Well, but at the same time, you said you can't blame them for trying, and
yeah.
They're going to try it, and but that's where my bigger concern is not necessarily even starting it. It's where do you draw the line where you just say this isn't practical? We've already seen with MLS doing their World Cup type tournament. You've already had some games postponed because of COVID positive tests. So at what point? Where is the line? If you're the commissioner, if you're the owners. Certainly if you're the Players Association or union, where is the line where you just say, this just isn't going to be in the cards?
Well, 10 of the baseball teams really didn't want to play, right? I mean, because they were going to lose. I mean, 10 of these teams are in this tepidly to begin with because there's no upside for them financially to play, and they're not going to win a World Series either way. I mean, the Orioles are one of those places, right?
Sure, but I don't care about that kind of rap. My rap, I'm speaking much more from the standpoint of, from the safety standpoint of, from the feasibility.
But if there was a talking them out of it, right? The 10 owners that are losing money would go to the 20 that may stand to make money or win a cheap championship or sell some postseason, whatever the upside is for the St. Louis Cardinals or the New York Yankees. I mean, the Dodgers, who have all this money involved, whatever that is, the 10 that are losing money are not winning the argument right now, right? Literally, the people winning the argument are the show must go on, and that's being led by I guess those that still think they might make. Look, Disney World opened this week, right? Are they really making money? Or the rides are open? There's no one there. What does it take to close it? They'll say, well, the COVID's gotten too bad. The fact of the matter is they're losing $1 million a day being open, so let's just shut it down, right? So with baseball, I think we go into that knowing that at least a third of these teams didn't want to play to begin with because there was no financial. The only reason to play is for money. I mean, literally, the only reason to play is money. And if there's no money to be made, then why are you playing?
Well, because maybe you're losing less money than you would lose if you're not playing whatsoever. It's at this point, it's kind of trying to figure out a way to minimize your losses as much as possible, and that's why with the NFL and the NFL Players Association, that's why I've always said, pump the brakes, because they haven't gotten to the point where they're talking about the financial reality of this, the reality that the Ravens, even in a best case scenario this year, from a fan standpoint, are going to have 14,000 people in the stadium. Not that I think, not that I'm buying that that's necessarily going to happen at any point. But that's the reality, and that's where baseball has had that play out to a very ugly degree publicly. The NFL, you'd like to think, because they just signed a new CBA, that it will be a little more cordial. It can be a little more constructive, but we'll see how that plays out. Again, it's tough to say, but I keep coming back to the question of where is that line? Back in March, it was very clear. I mean, the dominoes fell very quickly. Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz tested positive for COVID, or for the coronavirus, and Adam Silver shut down the NBA. The NHL followed. Major League Baseball followed. The NCAA tournament, which they were trying to, they were going to have it without any fans even, canceled it. So the dominoes got rolling there. As we're now in the open up phase, or at least attempting to open back up phase, how does this work? MLS is trying to massage their way through this. We've had golf and NASCAR, but those are individual-driven sports and lend itself to distancing in the way that the team sports do not. So my question is, if one positive test is what shut it down, we knew that coming back there would be positive tests. Anyone who thought that wasn't going to be the case, I thought was unrealistic. But how much is too much? When is enough? When is enough? And that's the question that I think we're all asking, whether you're on the more optimistic side, whether you're on the more pessimistic side. But where is that line? Is it a quarter of the players in the league testing positive? Is it an individual getting really, really sick to the point where they're, heaven forbid, in the ICU? I don't know. I don't know, Nestor. I mean, this is a kind of conversation I never thought I'd be having with you in the sports realm, and that's where, you do kind of come back to, almost like an Occam's razor kind of principle, where you just say, should we really be doing this? And that's a completely fair question. Whether they're able to find a way to manage to pull this off or not, ultimately.
I know the Washington football team's going to be renamed at some point, and we're on the front end of that. I don't know, you got anything on that at all? I mean, other than the fact that, I go back to, and I'm wistful about how awful the Orioles have become as human beings, as an organization, what I've seen with my eyes over the last 30 years. And I think about the Ravens coming into birth, and at that time where the Redskins were in the pecking order of sports and where the Ravens were, and we've had two parades here now, and the Redskins built this stadium down there right at the same time we built ours, right? And what the franchise's fortunes have been, and I know Dan Snyder's made plenty of money, and
Sure.
That's aside from all of this, but from what the standing of the Redskins meant in Washington, where they were the number one dog, and the Capitals and the Bullets couldn't get out of their way, and there was never going to be a baseball team there. Now you have the world champion Nationals, the Stanley Cup champion Capitals, Nationals and Capitals, and now the Redskins are in a corner trying to figure out where they want to have a stadium, where they want to have a team, and now they're going to go through an entire brand change against the will of the owner. I mean, You know, they are my friends who love the Redskins have run from them in a way that my friends who love the Orioles have not run from the Orioles. You know.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, first of all, you know, the name changes. I mean, it's driven by money. I mean, Dan Snyder. If FedEx hadn't threatened to pull, you know, their names on the stadium down there. You know, if you didn't have sponsors and Nike taking Washington out of it and making it look like there's 31 NFL teams on their website as far as merchandise goes. I mean, you know, if those things weren't happening, you know, even with the current climate of race relations and social justice conversation and how that ties in with Washington with the Redskins name or the Cleveland Indians or discussions about the Braves or any other teams you want to talk about, you know, so much of it, you know, it's tied into money. And it is amazing because I you know, when you're talking about the early to mid 90s, when you consider where Washington was at that point with, you know, the championships under Joe Gibbs and where they stood in the hierarchy, not just in D.C., but, you know, just, you know, they were one of the NFL's class model kind of organizations in the 80s and early 90s. And for them to be where they are now, it's very eye-opening. And you know, I'll say this much, and I've kind of felt this way. I'm not Native American, so I'm not going to get into, you know, who's offended by the Redskins name or not and all of that. But, you know, I've felt for a long time, considering, I mean, this has been discussed since I was a kid. It's been discussed with more energy, let's say, over the last 5 to 10 years. You know, I've thought for a while that, you know, considering what's ailed that organization, and, you know, it starts with ownership with Dan Snyder, I've kind of thought, you know, maybe a new brand would be you know, you reboot, you can sell a lot of new merchandise. You're going to get your stadium in D.C. on the RFK site, I suppose they talk about, and all of that. But, you know, for it to happen now, I can't say I'm shocked, but as far as this being some kind of statement of real progress, I'm skeptical as far as that part of the narrative because, you know, it has to do with making money, and Dan Snyder was going to lose a heck of a lot of money if he didn't change the name finally. So they're going to change it, and life will go on. And
doesn't make Dan Snyder a right guy, does it?
Yeah, right. And that's kind of my point with this whole thing. But, you know, as far as I mean, I have Redskins fans in my world. You know, I try to limit the number. But, you know, I talk to them. You know, I've talked to them about this over the years, and, you know, some opinions for or against the name change, and, you know, you can feel a certain way about it. It's, you know, each individual person is going to feel a certain way, but, you know, I think there's far more hand-wringing and far more concern about how god-awful that football team's been for the better part of, you know, close to 30 years now. You know, Mark Rippon was almost 30 years ago at this point, so it's pretty wild to think about that, but it's definitely going to be strange because, you know, having grown up in this general area, you know, the Redskins at one point in time were incredibly relevant, and now, well, they're going to be called something else, and, you know, that's okay by me, and, you know, we'll see if a new name and a new coat of paint changes anything about that organization.
I'll still hate them like they were the Redskins.
Yeah, and I'll still be skeptical as long as Dan Snyder is their owner.
I got to find the picture of the Redskins hat burning on the grill back in 1997. I got to go back and find that day. And Syracuse on my Get Nasty van, getting drunk with everybody after the Baltimore Ravens beat the Washington Redskins. I remember that used to be a big deal around here. Yeah, that used to mean something here, Luke Jones. It means something to your dad. I promise you that.
It still does. The difference is it's just expected now. You know, right? I mean, it's, you know, that was, but yeah, back in the day, that was a big deal whenever the Ravens played the Redskins, and certainly when they played Indianapolis.
I remember when Billick looked at me, Super Bowl year, when Stephen Davis ran through the line. Remember that? And we lost.
I was there, actually.
And I walked in, and Billick knew how I felt about the Washington Redskins, and he was, you know, I mean, he knew I was not happy that we lost to the Washington Redskins. So yes, we've owned that relationship for a little while, but you know, I'll probably still call them the Redskins for a while, right? I mean, I still call the Chargers San Diego, right?
Yeah. Well, what's funny, and I always bring this up, and it's funny, the 2 Super Bowl years, the Ravens lost against the road games to the Redskins. So, Maybe the Ravens haven't owned that in terms of head-to-head, but they've certainly owned it as far as relevancy and success here in the local area. So, we'll see if a name change brings any change in that regard. But again, if Dan Snyder's still owning the team, I'm going to guess not.
I hope they rename the Red Sellers from where they dwell in the NFC East. He is Luke Jones, Baltimore Luke. If there's football, we'll talk about it. If there's baseball, we'll cover it. If there's going to be baseball, I guess. I mean, they're going to try to play football, I guess. I will continue to opine about the I don't know, the logic of it all. But we'll continue to challenge that in each and every segment we're doing. Don Moeller is going to join us this week. We have lots and lots of great stuff ahead at Baltimore Positive. I want to give a shout-out to everything Don's done here as we start to merge content getting in on September for becoming Baltimore Positive. But we're going to hear from Pam Wood at the Baltimore Sun this week. Also going to hear from Marilyn Mosby, first-time visitor here as well this week. Kevin Burns going to join us later on this week. Robin and Jason Marks, who are my favorite people here in Baltimore, as well as Van Brooks, joining us on Baltimore Positive all week long. And if you missed it last week, Michael Steele was here, Speaker of the House, and Bill Ferguson, as well as first conversation ever with Brooke Learman, who's my delegate. So great to have Brooke on the show as well. And Senator Corey McCray, all at Baltimore Positive this week. Taharka Ice Cream, bringing the honey graham in full flavor. My friends at Royal Farms with Chicken Palooza. It is Chicken Palooza month. And my pal Bill Cole, doing Cole Roofing and Gordian Energy, saving you dough, fixing roofs as it heats up on your roof and my roof as well. Go get some chicken at Royal Farms and gas up, stay home, put the AC on, put a mask on, wear some gloves, and stay clean. I am Nestor. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Luke can be found, Luke at WNST.net. Together, we are calm, we are local, and we are Baltimore Positive.